Welcome back to our snow day class. We're going to jump right into modes of discourse. I'm going to go quite quickly with this presentation because the program that I use only gives me 15 minutes, and so this is probably a longer lecture than 15 minutes. So I just want you to have things available for you. You're going to need lasers in the jungle. You are going to need your book, The Lost City of the Monkey God. And you're going to be doing some practice with those pages at the end of this presentation. This presentation is PowerPoint. It's going to be uploaded into the announcements. It's already in the content area already, but it will be right by this presentation, so you'll be able to go back and look at that PowerPoint and go as slow as you want to after I'm done with my presentation. All right, so what are modes of discourse? Well, first of all, we need to talk about author's purpose. Every author has a purpose when they start to write. When they put the pencil to the paper or their fingers to the keyboard, they all have a reason why they need to write something down. And there's really three overarching umbrella reasons to write. One is to inform, one is to persuade, and one is to entertain. Those are the big, broad purposes. But we're going to talk about what's underneath those purposes, and we're going to talk about the modes of discourse. And that is the different ways authors will write in order to deliver their purpose to the audience, because everybody needs to be able to relate to their audience. So writing is all about having a purpose and knowing your audience. So here we go. The four modes of discourse we're going to go through, and these modes of discourses are a way of presenting what is written or what is spoken. So rhetorical modes develop those ideas that you want to communicate, and they also achieve a particular effect on the reader. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is narration. Narration is just a story. It's telling a story. And there's an example here from Preston's book. On May 1st, the weather finally cleared on Key West. The plane carrying the LiDAR machine took off, refueled in Grand Cayman, and arrived in Roatan Airport at 2 p.m. Everyone rushed out to the airport to meet it, applauding and cheering. When it was finally touched down, our search for the lost city could begin. So this is just a little anecdote. It's a little story that Preston tells to get us all excited about the LiDAR getting to Roatan. Any kind of story is narration. It can be a memoir, it can be a fairy tale, it can be anything. Narration is really important because our brains are wired to listen to stories. Humans love stories. It's how we learn the best, and it makes us pay attention the most. So narration is super important, and it's a very effective way of relating to your audience. All right, the next one is exposition. Exposition is all about informing and explaining. So this is telling. It's telling what happened, it's telling you how to do things, it's telling you how things work. It's very objective, and it doesn't have a lot of bias in it. The bias is very limited. Every author is going to have some sort of bias, but an expository text is trying to keep all of the opinion and all of the subjective stuff out and just tell how it is and what to do. So this is exposition. It is very objective and non-biased, as non-biased as it can be, right? It's about recipes and how to fix a car engine and any kind of report that you have to write, especially scientific reports, right? These are all expository texts. And here's a little bit of an expository text from Chapter 11. The Skymaster was a twin-engine aircraft driven by what aviators call a push-pull configuration. When the two engines mounted in line, one on the nose and the other at the rear of the fuselage, the plane's most distinctive features are two struts or booms that extend beyond the wings. So this is just telling us about the engine in this twin-engine aircraft. It's giving us information of how it's made, how it works. And that is what expository texts do. The third one is description. description describes something, right? And it also gives a dominant impression. This is all about helping your audience experience the same thing that you did, that you're writing about. Whatever you're writing about, whatever you want the audience to experience, you use description in order to bring them in. A lot of times description is embedded in narration. When you're in the middle of a story, all of a sudden the author will stop and describe the place. They'll tell what's there, what you see, what you smell, what you hear, right? And that gives you a mood or a feeling, and you can totally visualize what's going on in that story. So description uses a lot of the five senses. That's the main part, is the five senses. What you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you feel, what you taste, right? All of those things are what description is about. So, and the dominant impression is that one thing that is the strongest impression that the author wants you to take away from it as an audience member. Okay, so once, this is from Preston again. Once a cheerful red and white, the paint job on this plane was full of patches and strips that had peeled off, and an ugly streak of oil ran down the fuselage from the forward engine. A big green lidar box almost filled the interior of the plane. This sleek, advanced, and costly piece of technology, so top secret it had to be guarded by soldiers, was being schlepped around in a shabby flying tin can. So there's your dominant impression, shabby flying tin can. And it is kind of, you start off by thinking that this is going to be this really picture perfect plane with the cheerful red and white, and very quickly Preston has you revising that prediction into that shabby flying tin can that you want, that he wants you to picture. All right, so this is the image that he wants you to see as he's describing the plane. That's what description is. Five senses, sensory writing that creates a dominant impression. All right, the last one is persuasion. And persuasion is wanting to convince the audience. The writer wants to convince the audience, and they want to change their mood, their mind, or their willingness to act, or all three. So this is any kind of politician that's trying to get you to vote for them or agree with their policies. They're using persuasion. Commercials on TV, they're using persuasion. They want you to buy their stuff, right? Maybe your best friend really wants you to go to a restaurant that you don't really like. They're going to try persuasion in order to get you to go. So here is a little excerpt. This is not from The Lost City of the Monkey God. This is from The Awful Truth About Archaeology. This is the part at the end. So I'm going to read that. This is her persuasive argument at the end. Is archaeology the most mind-numbing pursuit in the world, as Kelvin claims, or is it so exciting, like as my airline seatmates always exclaim? Both, and much more. What Laura and Indy and the others don't know is that archaeology is not about things. It is about people. It is about understanding life in the past, about understanding who we are and where we came from, not just where we came from as a particular cultural group, but what we share with all people in this time and in all the time that came before. So her argument is, this is not a treasure hunt, right? This is not a treasure hunt, and it's not this really boring, tedious thing either. It is exciting because we get to learn about what makes humanity humanity across the time and space that has happened on this earth. So that is her argument, her persuasive argument. And that's usually what we call the thesis of a persuasive text, is an argument or a claim. So there you go. This is a persuasive claim. All right, so I have a little bit more to talk to you about. Here's a summary. This slide is just a summary, and I'm going to ask you to do some practicing. The reason I put it all on one slide is because sometimes when you're trying to figure out what mode of discourse is which, it's easier if you have it all on one page. So I just put it all on one page. Persuasion, the subjective biased thing here is right next to expository, which is logical, factual, objective, right? And then we have description, which is dominant impression, focuses on the 5 senses, and narration, which tells a story and is usually ordered by time. So there you have the 4 major modes of discourse that you will be able to use this slide to complete your practice. The other thing I need to talk to you about is sometimes texts have mixed modes of discourse. There's more than one in the same text. And we already know that because I've given you 3 examples out of The Lost City of the Monkey God, 3 different modes of discourse already. So what we call that are there's a predominant mode of discourse, and there are other modes that support the dominant mode. So I'm going to give you this example here. I'm just going to read it. Let's say I'm a writer and I want to persuade you. And that will be my predominant mode of discourse, is persuasion, because my goal is to make you change your mood, your mind, or your willingness to act. That's why I'm writing, is so you change your mood, your mind, or your willingness to act. I'm trying to persuade you or convince you, right? But in order to do that persuading, I might start with a story, because remember what I said, that stories are really important because humans hook into stories and they want to hear them, and our brains are wired for them. So I'm going to start by hooking you in with a story, and then you're going to be on my side already, and that story is going to relate to what I want to convince you about. And it's also going to relate to something about the topic that you probably don't know. So the next mode of discourse that I'm going to use is inform. I'm going to tell you about my topic. Here I have this great story that I told you, this narration that is hooked you in, and now you're like, oh, and now I'm going to inform you about my topic. I'm going to tell you about it, and so you have some background knowledge on whatever my topic is. So now you have a story and you have some background knowledge, and you're starting to go, oh, okay. And then I'm going to go in for the kill, and I'm going to bring in all of my subjective biases, and I'm going to try and convince you to think the way I think and to feel the way I feel. So your mood changes to match my mood with this, and your mind changes to think the way I think, and then maybe I'll even be able to get you to do what I want you to do. So my main mode, my predominant mode, is persuasion. The secondary modes are narration and exposition. So that's how it all kind of works together. And so you're going to have to do some careful reading with that. All right, so then this question you can pause and you can think about. What are Douglas Preston's modes of discourse? And what is the predominant mode of discourse in Lasers in the Jungle? I want you to actually think about that. What is the predominant mode of Lasers in the Jungle? Okay, think about that. And then, how does mode relate to tone? Whatever you said was your mode of discourse for Lasers in the Jungle, how does that relate to the tone of the article? All right, I just want you to think about that. Maybe jot some notes about that. I'm going to ask you about that on Monday. You don't have to hand in anything about that, but I'm going to ask you that question first. How does mode of discourse relate to tone? All right, so the next several slides are practice slides, and I'm just going to go through them quickly. You're going to reread pages 88 and 89, and you're going to annotate this for modes of discourse. Okay, so it's in chapter 11. And you're going to practice that. Then you're also going to go back to that Word document that I asked you to start with the definition, paraphrase definition of LiDAR. And I'm going to have you paraphrase the steps to LiDAR now. This is on pages 89 to 90. And so add to your document, okay? And just say steps to LiDAR. All right, and then the last thing is you're going to do the same thing on pages 96 to 97, and you're going to annotate the modes of discourse. Okay, so there we are. We're done with modes of discourse. questions, email me.